endless stories about growing old too quickly or discovering the fountain of youth. Visit the Boys of Summer or go down under with Outback Heroes. It's simply the best entertainment, and you'll find it right here with HBO's Monday Night Main Event. This Monday night at 8, Charlie Sheen and Tom Berenger star in Major League.
Want us to lose?
What I want for us to finish dead last.
Tom Berenger, Charlie Sheen, Corbin Burnson, and Bob Uecker. Major League. Don't steal home without it. Monday on HBO.
On the next HBO original movie,
Shouldn't I take my clothes off now?
he gave her his heart. She put him in prison.
You could have ruined our entire plan.
Our plan? Our plan? You know, it looks like I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just being whipped around, but actually I do know what I'm doing.
Oh, Wiley, let's just do this.
Who says romance is dead? Jeff Goldblum, Kristen Scott Thomas. Framed. Premieres Sunday, June 24th on HBO.
She's talented. She's dedicated. She's 14 years old. And according to experts, Jennifer Capriati is headed for superstardom in the highly competitive world of professional tennis. An international sensation on the court. Off court, she's the girl next door. Join HBO Sports with host Billie Jean King for an up-close and personal look at this special teenager. The Making of a Champion, Jennifer Capriati, premieres Friday, June 15th on HBO.
Boris Becker, Steffi Graf, Jennifer Capriati, Yvonne Lendl, Martina Navratilova. Competition that's simply the best. Join Jim Lampley, Arthur Ashe, and Billie Jean King for complete coverage of the world's most prestigious tennis tournament. Wimbledon 90 begins June 25th on HBO.
Iron Mike Tyson returns to the ring for the first time since going down in the biggest upset in history. He has something to prove against Henry Tillman. George Foreman continues his drive towards destiny, taking on top contender Adelson Rodriguez. HBO Sports presents the boxing doubleheader of the year. Iron Mike Tyson, George Foreman. Live Saturday, June 16th, 10 Eastern, 7 Pacific. HBO Boxing is simply the best.
The best summer ever on HBO.
A sport steeped in tradition. 600 years of history. The maker of legends. It is a game full of emotion and character.
I can't believe this!
It has evolved into a multi-million-dollar business.
Girls play a nice game of tennis for girls. But when they get out there on a court with the man.
But above all, the tournaments representing the Grand Slam have supplied us with some of sport's fondest memories. HBO Sports presents History of Tennis. And now, from the Tennis Hall of Fame in Newport, Rhode Island, here are your hosts, Arthur Ashe and Billie Jean King.
Hello, and welcome to this beautiful location. For the next hour, Billie Jean and I will take you through the history of this great game. We start by taking a look at the game's roots. It was called real tennis back in the 13th century and was created by French royalty. Not exactly the game you and I are familiar with, was it, Billie Jean?
That's right, Arthur. In fact, back there in the 13th century in France, there were 1,800 real tennis courts.
That's an incredible number of courts for those times. And of course, the English made it even more popular. And the great William Shakespeare mentioned the sport in 6 of his plays, paying perhaps the ultimate compliment to this game we love so much. But now, there are 34 of these courts left in the entire world, 7 in the U.S., and 1 just 60 yards away right here in Newport.
And all of this brings us to where we begin our journey through the history of tennis. Our story begins in the 16th century in England. Let's take a look at the sport which has influenced our lives so greatly.
This is Hampton Court Palace, some 40 miles outside London. It was here during the early part of the 16th century that the game British purists call real tennis became the sport of British royalty. Today, few know that King Henry VIII was perhaps the most enthusiastic of royal players, for history has documented his life more with the fatal demise of his many wives than with his athletic exploits. One historian records that so great was Henry VIII's love for tennis, he was on the court when his second wife, Anne Boleyn, was beheaded.
Henry VIII, of course, was a great sportsman in more ways than one, as everybody knows. And it's very difficult to know whether the story of Anne Boleyn is true and the real tennis. But one can imagine it was, because he was forever playing real tennis. He loved real tennis. The original court at Hampton Court is still there. So we like to think that the story is true, and it probably was.
Real tennis, or court tennis, is a combination of squash and tennis, with many a great shot played off the back and side walls.
This game really is the ancestor of all the racket games. Lawn tennis, the game that Boris Becker plays outside, started because some people were waiting to play on a court such as this one. And while they were waiting, they just hit a few balls around on the court, on the grass outside. You'll still find, even in lawn tennis, traces of this game. The origin of the word service, for instance, comes from real tennis, where, for some reason, 500 years ago, it was considered beneath the dignity of the nobleman to actually put the ball into play. So he literally called service, and one of his servants ran on and started off for him.
This is Major Walter Clopton Wingfield, regarded as the father of lawn tennis. In 1874, he called his game Sphoristica, fully packaged with rules, diagrams, rackets, balls, net, and a brush for marking the court.
There's a big argument about who introduced the game to the United States, whether it was a man named Dr. James Dwight in the United States. Since I'm from Boston, we accept that version because he did it in a place called Nahant, just outside of Boston, and he is the acknowledged father of the game in the United States. But we get into trouble with the feminists because there was a woman named Mary Outerbridge who may have been the first to introduce it.
In 1874, Mary Outerbridge observed the game in Bermuda and brought it back to Staten Island.
I think the man who really is very good at refereeing this is Dr. Dwight's son, who is still alive, lives in Boston, and he says, who cares whether my father or Mary Outerbridge brought it to the United States, introduced it? The main thing is that somebody did, and I think that's a good way to referee that one. So you could call Outerbridge and Dwight the father and mother of American tennis, if you would.
It is now accepted fact that Dr. James Dwight and his friend Fred Sears first hit tennis balls in 1874, and 2 years later in Nahant were finalists in the first tournament ever held.
There's absolutely no question of that first tournament. I have the records of it being played in 1876. It was a round-robin tournament, and it was a handicap tournament. Fred Sears and my father were scratch, and my father won the tournament. And I have a little gold tennis racket about 2 inches long with a little seed pearl on it, which was the prize.
From these beginnings, Newport, Rhode Island soon became the mecca of American tennis for the newly formed United States Lawn Tennis Association. But the game outgrew Newport, and in 1915, the championships moved to Forest Hills, the home of the West Side Tennis Club, which for the next 62 years would become America's answer to Wimbledon. So popular was the game in the East that the more enterprising tennis lovers improvised methods to make it a year-round sport, both winter and summer.
The game was spreading westward. They were playing tournaments all the way to the West Coast and throughout the Midwest. It was becoming a popular game. But to count in the game of tennis, you had to be from the Northeast. The ranking players were all Ivy League athletes.
In 1900, a young American player named Dwight Davis and two teammates challenged the British, the winner to receive the Davis Cup. The matches were held at the Longwood Croquet Club in Boston, and the United States won. The start of the challenge for the Davis Cup that yearly would be sought by countries, just as the Wimbledon Championship would be sought after by individuals.
Wimbledon really only started by accident. The All England Club was basically a croquet club, and it was to raise money for a new pony roller to keep the grass in good condition that someone came up with the brainwave of holding a tennis tournament.
And so the legendary Wimbledon Lawn Tennis Championships began. And through the decades, British monarchs seated in the royal box gave added mystique to the matches on the famed Wimbledon Center Court. But it was an American tennis queen that gave Wimbledon its first international flavor. In 1905, May Sutton earned a place in tennis history as the first American to win a Wimbledon championship.
May Sutton's win at Wimbledon in 1905 and 1907 really changed the way the world viewed tennis. It was now an international sport. The Davis Cup was expanded to 6 nations. Competitions like Wimbledon and the U.S. National Championships held here on these grounds in Newport were now taken seriously around the world. But still, the sport was reserved for the upper classes.
It certainly was. And among the upper classes, certain things were sort of expected as you were growing up. For instance, you had to learn to speak French, and you also had to learn to play tennis to sort of round out your social graces. And these things were borrowed from their British upper-class cousins, who were all very staunchly opposed to professionalism. But they also had a very heightened sense of fair play. And so it evolved in tennis that if the opponents at the end of a point couldn't agree on the outcome, they just simply played it over.
Only in tennis and racket sports do you warm up with your opponent. And the one person who really epitomized amateurism was Dwight Billy Davis. Born and bred in Boston, attended Harvard. In fact, he spent his whole life in public service. He was Secretary of War from 1925 to 1929 under Calvin Coolidge's administration.
And so after this first of the 2 great world wars, the time was now ripe for the emergence of some international tennis stars. A perfect time for athletes to take on legendary status in the world of sports.
The return to peace in the United States brought forth 2 symbolic names that would forever be associated with the decade that almost immediately followed the end of World War I. One was called the Roaring Twenties, the other, the Golden Age of Sports. Whatever the sport, there were living legends. Babe Ruth, Jack Dempsey, Red Grange. But the tennis world was dominated by perhaps the most flamboyant and controversial of the legends, Bill Tilden.
Bill Tilden had a hold on the populace that I don't think a tennis player has ever had since. He was a tragic story. He's one of the most tragic stories in America for a celebrity. He was a homosexual. He didn't really know quite what today he might be a great star of talk shows, you know, discussing his aberrations. People close to the game knew about Bill, but it wasn't the day of locker room reporters, of people really getting close to the athletes. I've known reporters who covered him, never talked to him.
Incredibly, Tilden won his first championship at age 27, and for 6 successive years, never lost a championship match.
He won the U.S. title 1920 through 1926. They held the Davis Cup from 1920 through 1926, a parallel period, and it was just Big Bill. And everywhere he went, he was treated as royalty, and he basked in this role. He loved it.
It seems that my friend Bert Cortello had been trying to persuade me to turn professional for some time. And I finally said to him that if he could get me a good movie contract, I'd turn pro and play pro tennis as well. So we went out and proceeded to sell the idea to Metro Goldwyn Mayer, and I'm leaving for the coast in a very short time to make a series of pictures for them.
If Bill Tilden was tennis's king, Frances Suzanne Lenglen was the reigning queen, a magnificent personality whom many believe to be the greatest in tennis history.
She, again, was a legend. There's no question about that. She was in cinematic terms, the Marilyn Monroe of her day, if you like. I mean, she had this tremendous personality. There was a mystique about her. She had a strong personality which dominated everything around her and everyone around her, not least her opponents.
Suzanne Lenglen played her last amateur tennis match in 1926, but France's prominence would be maintained by their four musketeers, who dominated the world tennis scene: Jean Barotra, Henri Cochet, René Lacoste, and Jacques Brugnon.
Individually and collectively, they all had extraordinary records. They started off by winning one title, and they ended up after 5 years by winning every single title in the world. So that the French flag was everywhere in the world in 1926.
The four musketeers led the French to 5 successive Davis Cup victories from 1927 to 1932, the prelude to economic and political upheavals that were taking place throughout the world. There was the Great Economic Depression in the United States and other countries. The rearming of Germany under Adolf Hitler, whose Aryan racial supremacy theory, he believed, extended even to the tennis court, where in a critical Davis Cup match in 1937, Baron Gottfried von Kram of Germany faced America's Don Budge.
The United States hadn't won the Davis Cup for a period of 10 years. Now we're playing Germany, and we have to get over Germany to challenge England, who were the holders of the Davis Cup. So we're about to leave the locker room, and the phone rang, and it was Hitler calling Kram up to wish him good luck. I was kind of mad that Roosevelt didn't call me up to wish me good luck, but he didn't do it. But we went out in the court, and I played very well the first 2 sets. I won the 3rd set. We had a rest period. I came back and won the 4th set.
Von Kram was a very stiff Aryan gentleman, would never show any emotions of any sort. But I think that there was a sort of threat hanging over the team at that time. That's what I feel. Maybe a personal opinion, but I think it was there.
Trailing 4 games to 1 in the 5th and final set, Budge finally won 8 games to 6.
Bill Tilden said it was the greatest match he'd ever seen, and it was voted by the tennis magazines as the best match that was ever played. So who am I to argue with it? I know I certainly wouldn't want to play the match over again.
Budge then led the United States to victory over the British to win the Davis Cup. In 1939, World War II begins.
We shall never descend to the German and Japanese level. But if anybody likes to play rough, we can play rough too.
After 6 years, there is again peace in the world.
Right after the war, Jack Kramer was a tremendous force in the game of tennis. His picture was on the cover of Time magazine in August of 1947, which for a tennis player was pretty stunning in those days. But he was a handsome Californian, came back in 47 and won everything, Wimbledon, the U.S. Championship, and then turned professional.
It was Kramer's early years as a professional that set the philosophy for the game as we know it today.
I, of course, realized way back in 1947 when I turned professional, lost to Bobby Riggs in Madison Square Garden in one day from being a champion. Well, you're not quite a bum, but you're close to it. And riding around on trains and cars for 3 or 4 weeks and seeing the difference in being part of the pro game as being part of Davis Cup, Wimbledon, Forest Hills, and so forth. It was just two different worlds.
Kramer and Riggs played a series of matches throughout 1948, and the following year, Pancho Gonzalez turned pro after winning 2 successive United States singles championships. Kramer and Gonzalez played 123 matches over an 8-month period. The final score, Jack Kramer 96 victories to but 27 for Gonzalez. Now it was time for another woman superstar. She appeared in the person of Little Mo, Maureen Connolly.
Probably the briefest great career in the history of tennis was that of Maureen Connolly. Little Mo, they call her, which was a wonderful nickname. She came into view as a teenage champion in the United States, won the Grand Slam as a teenager in 1953, and was through by the time she was 20 because of not a tragic accident in the sense that she was killed, but an accident that ended her career. She was riding on a horse which was struck by a truck. Her leg was very badly injured, and she never played competitively again.
Little Mo's record, 3 successive years ranked #1 in the world, 3 straight Wimbledon championships, 3 successive United States championships, first woman to win the Grand Slam, retired from competition at the age of 20. If there was a roaring 20s, then the inauguration of President John F. Kennedy ushered in the turbulent 60s. In tennis, it was the time of Australia's Rod Laver.
The team concept in Australia was one that I think was bred into players from way back in the early years, taking teams away overseas, getting along. You know, everyone had their own individual styles. I think, you know, just knowing that those things happened gave us that team concept of doing well for your country.
1962 was the year of Rod Laver. He became the first man in more than 2 decades to win the Grand Slam.
It was, you know, a great honor to be successful in pulling off the Grand Slam. It's unique that only Don Budge has won back in 1938 and then 1962 when I won it. You know, I feel, you know, very honored that I was able to put my best tennis together 4 different times during the year. You know, I think you have to have lady luck shining down to some extent.
7 years later as a pro, Rod Laver repeated his Grand Slam. At the same time, Billie Jean King was dominating women's tennis. It was no surprise to Alice Marble, who coached her as a teenager.
I thought she was 17, but she told me she was 15. And her parents would have to bring her up every weekend, and I'd teach her all Saturday afternoon and most of Sunday. And then I'd say, Billie Jean, go do your homework. Then she'd run in every 5 minutes and, what's wrong with my serve? Am I throwing the ball high enough? I'd say, go to your room and do your homework. And she was ideal because she was so naturally athletic.
Billie Jean's game was strong and aggressive. She served and volleyed, and if Forest Hills was her home, the center court of Wimbledon became her home away from home. As the years rolled on, her Wimbledon championships increased in singles, doubles, and mixed doubles.
5 in all.
That's it. She's got it.
This great lady player who has now eclipsed the record of Elizabeth Ryan, who so sadly died yesterday. Her 20th title, and one wonders whether it will ever be beaten. 6 singles, 10 doubles, and 4 mixed.
It is ironic that Martina Navratilova, her playing partner that momentous day, has the greatest chance of surpassing Billie Jean King's Wimbledon record.
But she's much too humble to discuss Billie Jean, the legend. But I can tell you she deserves every bit of that label. No one disputes the fact that Billie Jean was without peer in changing the modern game. And I salute you for that. But now, who were your favorites?
Well, thank you for those kind words, Arthur. I appreciate it. One of my all-time favorites, and someone I don't want us to forget, is Hazel Whiteman. She won the U.S. National Singles 4 times, but more importantly, she gave women the Whiteman Cup in 1923. Alice Marble, the serve and volleyer. Pauline Betts, 2 great serve and volleyers, Louise Bruff and Margaret DuPont. Doris Hart, Shirley Fry. 2 black women who were unable to play because of the color barrier. Isadore Channels and Ora Washington. the great South American Maria Bueno, the USA's Darlene Hard, and my all-time favorite, Suzanne Langland, because of the way she played. She played like a ballerina. The clothes she wore, she had a bandeau. She revolutionized tennis throughout the world because of her personality and because of her style. And who are some of your all-time favorites?
Well, Billie Jean, as you know, we spent a lot of our time outside the U.S., and so my list of favorite players is peppered with those who were born in other countries. But I start with Ellsworth Vines. And then there's the Englishman, Fred Perry, and the Japanese player, Tsushi Yamagishi, and the Ecuadorian, Pancho Segura, Ken Rosewall and Lou Hode, Tony Trabert, the Italian, Nicola Pietrangeli, the Swede, Jan-Erik Lundqvist, the Spaniard, Manuel Santana, the Indian player, Ramanathan Krishnan, Roy Emerson, John Newcomb, Tony Roach from Australia, Stan Smith of the U.S., Guillermo Vilas of Argentina. But my favorite all-time player was one that I lost 18 matches in a row to at one stage before winning, and that was the Rocket, Rod Laver.
Well, we all love the Rocket. And certainly our legends have each had an impact on the growth of this game in the 20th century. But tennis has also given us some very interesting personalities who have made their mark on the history of the sport. We call them the court characters. It's easy to see why.
In the era before World War II, tennis was known as the gentlemanly sport. Questionable decisions by officials were considered part of the game. Not so today.
Indicating he agrees with the line.
Many believe it all began with the legendary Pancho Gonzalez.
We get angry at ourselves. Maybe we didn't sleep well enough because we stayed up late watching television. Maybe we ate too much the night before. We get angry at ourselves. So by getting that anger out, it drives us to drive ourselves and play harder, and then the result is better. So it's not aimed at anybody, especially. The anger of most people is the same.
Gonzalez really worried about the light here, asking Mr. Duncombe, the referee, how long do we have to play here in this light? But this is a question for the referee, I think.
I was fairly aggressive, so I think most of the time a lot of people were a little afraid, and even after they were afraid, we'd get into an argument, and it didn't make any difference to me, because, as I always said, I was just as happy playing at Exposition Park as I was playing at Wimbledon Center Court.
Unless I'm wrong, I think Pancho has told Mr. Duncan that unless the match is called, I think that he might pick up his rackets. Nope, he's going to go on with it. Of course, Mike Gibson.
Game is taking set. The Passerelle, 6-1.
So Mike Gibson is just calling it off because of the light.
The match will now be stopped owing to sailing light.
And Gonzalez really throwing his racket down there. Mr. Duncombe, the umpire, has called it off. At the,
it really didn't make any difference to me what they thought, because I don't think I was bad at all for the game of tennis, no matter what I did. And usually it takes two to provoke an argument, so it's not just one person's fault that one starts, it's the other person's as well.
Following Gonzalez came Ili Nastasi.
Well, the press photographers are clearly worrying Nastasi.
Nastasi was perhaps the most gifted player of his time, but his need to exploit the crowd and bait the officials prevented greatness.
I think I was even worse when I was a boy, especially when I was 7 or 8. You know, I started to play late when I was about 12 or 13. My sport was soccer, like every kid in Europe, you know, start to play soccer. But when I was 16, they started to kick me because I was doing the same thing like in tennis, you know. I was trying to make fun of everybody, so they kicked my legs, so I stopped completely.
Nastasi, will you please come this side of the court? There is a second service.
First of all, start, very nice. You don't call me Nastasi. You call me Mr. Nastasi. First, that's better. Yes? Yes, sir. Yes? But I'm reporting you to referee. You call me Nastasi. Call me Mr.
I'm telling you right now, you play or it's a game. You have 30 seconds. You play or it's a game, right?
Nastasi's saying I wasn't ready. You can't say what I'm not ready.
You're not talking to him. You're supposed to be playing tennis. Nothing to do here.
Imagine everybody being like Lendl or like Borg, and I'm not saying that everybody should be like us, because it's not good either, but it's good to have some, you know, something different there.
Admit you're wrong. He's wrong. The ball.
If Nastasi's behavior prevented him from reaching greatness, many believe Jimmy Connors went further than his talents because of his explosive personality.
Sales is probably kind of down to that request. Let's see.
I've always had greatest admiration for him as a fighter. I'm not saying his behavior has always been as good as you'd like to see on a tennis court, but I've always regarded him as a great fighter, and with a couple of notable exceptions, always been willing to give his all on a tennis court. I think he's consistently been in the top 10 ever since he started playing tennis. That's a pretty good record.
Now, Connors is complaining that he thought the Lewis shot was over the baseline.
Oh, well, Jesus Christ. No wonder McEnroe gets upset over...
I was third in that group. I was a little bit before McEnroe, but to have Nastasi, myself, and McEnroe on the same time was could have been disaster. I think people enjoy seeing someone who not only plays great tennis, but gives a little bit extra. Now, what is that little bit extra without going too far? I think people also love to see somebody who just opens up their chest and shows their heart, and not afraid to.
But you can't be serious, man. You cannot be serious. That ball was on the line. Chalk flew up. It was clearly in. How many you gonna miss? Now he's walking over. Everyone knows it's in this whole stadium, and you call it out? I can't get any worse, the press I'm getting here, because you guys are just so low that it makes me sick, man. Can you pick on someone else, man? You got anyone else you can pick on? It was break point. What the hell did you call? How could you? Why didn't you call it in? What the hell are you doing calling it? He didn't say anything about that.
People are allowed their own opinion, and if their opinion is to remember me for the way I acted on the court, that's the way it's going to be. If they're going to remember me for the way I play tennis, I would obviously prefer that. I think if I couldn't play the way I played, people wouldn't remember me in the first place. So,
no mistakes whatsoever. Answer my question! The question, jerk! Come on! This is absurd! I can't believe this!
I would like to be remembered as being a fighter who truly enjoyed playing tennis.
Well, most of the time I was out of the control, but I didn't admit it when I was playing, you know. And it was too late to admit it, you know, once the match was over, you know, it's too late.
That's the way I live my life. I live my life as I play my tennis. I don't know if that's good, I don't know if that's bad, but it seemed to work for me in the past, but that's the way I enjoy it.
It's never as bad or as good as it seems. And I'm just another case. I'm just another victim of the press. And certainly I am partially to blame because I let it spiral and they took advantage.
The fact is that McEnroe, Connors, Nastasi, and Gonzalez were brilliant tennis players. You may not have condoned their behavior on the court, but all of us marveled at their talent and their courage. Still, they were controversial, and the question is always asked, well, is this behavior good or bad for the game? Billie Jean, what do you think?
Emotion is great for the game. There's always that fine line, though, that's very difficult for players at times. That's where it's important for the umpire to be in total control throughout the match. The one thing I never liked is when an umpire is trying to speak with the player and the microphone is still on.
Well, I agree, but that's not the primary problem. Even though most tennis players are not like, say, any different than football or basketball players, it's the spontaneity of their outbursts that caused the difficulty. In 1975, I was playing Ilie Nastase at the Grand Prix Masters at Stockholm, and a series of his outbursts lasted over 1/2 an hour, and I soon realized the umpire was going to do nothing about it. And so I walked off the court, leading 4-1 in the third set, and was eventually awarded the match the following morning. And now, 13 years later, I sometimes wonder if international companies want to associate their product with a sport that sometimes condones such behavior and doesn't obey its own rules.
In spite of all this, the top players still pull in millions per year from endorsements alone. That's without lifting a racket. But as you'll see, it wasn't always that way. The modern era of tennis had very humble beginnings. It wasn't so long ago that even the top names in tennis struggled to make a living playing the game.
I've heard lots of rumors, pro and con, about how the public and how the officials feel about professional tennis, and I'd like to take a on-the-spot visit just to find out for myself so there will be no misunderstanding.
In 1953, Jack Kramer decides he now needs Australian tennis stars to highlight his pro tour.
Well, it really started with Frank Sedgman, who was a great name down there and a great Davis Cup player. And to keep him from turning pro earlier, they had a national fundraising deal. And I think they raised close to $100,000 and gave it to Frank under the tax laws. He could keep it to keep him from turning pro in 1952. But they didn't realize that by merging the pro and amateur game that we have now, why it would have been better for them, better for the players, better for the sport.
When the opportunity came to turn professional with Kramer, and he made this good offer to me, so that was probably the only way that you could make any real money and make a career of tennis was to turn professional, and so that's what I did.
The floodgates were now open. For the game to survive, it now became evident that open tennis, amateurs and pros in the same tournaments, was the tennis of the future.
Open tennis really got underway when Lamar Hunt came into the game and sponsored 20 tournaments, $50,000 each purse, 32 players. Mike Davies was the commissioner and was told to go find the best 32 he could find and have those players go at it.
In 1967, Wimbledon, the bastion of amateur tennis, opened its courts to the pros, and Rod Laver defeated his countryman Ken Rosewall to win the first men's pro championship. The following year, 1968, two Australian left-handers met in the final of the first Wimbledon Open Championship. Rod Laver defeated Tony Roach in straight sets in a tournament that saw every named pro and amateur entered. A few months later at the United States Championships, Forest Hills kept pace with a memorable first. Arthur Ashe defeated Tom Ocker in the final to become the first black male to ever win a Grand Slam title. The men were still on center stage.
I think the landmarks of women's tennis in my life have been Suzanne Longden, followed by Billie Jean King. I think they were role models who changed the concept of the game in the way they looked, the way they played, their attitude towards their position in social life, and they have made a very significant step forward for women's tennis.
Though men's tennis flourished, women were still ignored financially, their prize money set at 75% less than the men.
I believe I was about 16 or 17 when the two bodies of tennis, the USTA and also Virginia Slims, which was, you know, the big sponsor for women's tennis, they were sort of feuding. And Billie Jean King, Rosie Casals, those players chose to go with Virginia Slims. It was like a radical move, you know, and the USTA was the establishment.
Women's tennis called upon Gladys Heldman to be their voice to gain equality with the men.
You need three basic elements. You need an author, and you need a financier, and you need a star. Now, this happened to be exactly what we got. We had the author, Gladys Hellman, we had the financier, Joe Coleman, Philip Morris, Virginia Slims, and we had the star in Billie Jean King. So the ingredients were perfect, and they were there. And it all fell into place like any successful production.
What a scene it is, the Houston Astrodome, where up till now they've played almost every sport in the world.
1973, Houston. Billie Jean King accepts the challenge of 55-year-old Bobby Riggs in the best 3 out of 5 set match.
A wild scene almost reminiscent of college football, with the celebrities present, with the big band here, with dance.
I'm ready to play, and I'm going to try to win for all the guys around the world who feel as I do, that the male is king, the male is supreme. I've said it over and over again. I still feel that way. Girls play a nice game of tennis for girls. But when they get out there on a court with the man, even a tired old man of 55, they're going to be in big trouble.
And she breaks through. In a love game, Billie...
Well, the Riggs-King match popularized the game tremendously because more people saw the game of tennis, for good or bad, than any other time in history, and the build-up to it and the aftermath did a tremendous amount in selling the sport. So you got to hand it to Bobby and Billie Jean for pulling it off. I think it was a marvelous thing for tennis.
It is over. Let's watch Bobby Riggs.
The final score. Billie Jean King the winner in straight sets, 6-4, 6-3, 6-3. 1973, the dark period in tennis history. Nicky Pilic is barred from playing Wimbledon after refusing to play for Yugoslavia in the Davis Cup.
A very difficult year, an emotional year too, because there was no doubt at the time, there was a general feeling in Britain that not just Wimbledon, but tennis in general was under attack.
The top players of the world boycott Wimbledon, with most of the superstars not entered. Jan Kodish defeats Alex Metrovelli in straight sets.
The interesting thing about that Wimbledon was that the British public in particular rallied round to the tournament in the way they did, because the attendances that year were the second highest on record at that time.
With players now becoming household names, its superstars could earn astronomical figures with endorsements.
Do you know me? I won Wimbledon, but when I travel, more people are impressed with this than a good backhand.
Very close shave.
You must be joking. That ball was in.
No, Mr. McEnroe, you're shaved. It's very close.
Of course. I shave with Bic.
Professionals like Yvonne Lendl use Bengay, not only after exercise, but to help warm up before.
Feel better with Bengay.
So great is the television exposure that sponsors sign up players of all ranks, with the hope that one day they will have the visibility of superstars like Bjorn Borg, who reportedly makes more money today in endorsements than he did before his retirement. Research reports that tennis players are amongst the most recognizable athletes in all of sport, and many of them make more money off the court than on.
You win a tournament and people say, okay, on Sunday afternoon he made 70,000. Well, number one, it's not only Sunday afternoon, it's the whole week. And it really is not only the whole week, it's from the age you were 3 or 4, or whenever you started till now. You have limited time when you have to make the money, and you know, if you make it to the top, it's unbelievable, but otherwise it's pretty hard.
To a sponsor, the raising of the victory racket for millions of viewers to see is worth the price they pay.
Today, those top professionals earn $6 to $8 million a year from prize money, endorsements, and exhibitions. It's incredible in the last 20 years how far tennis has come. I can still remember how difficult it was to unify the game. Can you believe what we went through?
Oh, it was unbelievably difficult in those days. 1968, when open tennis began, all sorts of new groups and people came online. First, there was the National Tennis League, founded by George McCall. Then Dave Dixon came on with the Handsome Eight. And then you had the Super Lawyers, led by Mark McCormick and Donald Dell. And then Lamar Hunt started a tour for contract professionals and called it World Championship Tennis. And then Bill Reardon came on with his own independent group. And then, 4 years later, the ATP, the Association for Tennis Professionals, was formed. And as its second president, I well remember how difficult it was and frustrating I became
because so many of the foreign players didn't want to vote for their own future. But suddenly we realized that, hey, a lot of these players, like, say, Manuel Orantes of Spain, came from countries where no one voted. So we had unbelievable growing pains back in those days.
And the growing pains continued in 1973. In fact, your ATP withdrew from Wimbledon a week before it started. That same exact week, the women started our own Women's Tennis Association. We had two separate women's circuits, the USTA and the Virginia Slims. On September 20th, I played Robert Larimore Riggs.
Bobby Riggs?
The one and only Bobby Riggs. I still have nightmares over that. I wake up thinking, I haven't even played the match.
Big match.
It was very big. We had the most attendance ever in the history of the game. I'm glad I won the match, number one. And number two, it did help tennis grow.
It certainly did. And the future of this game obviously depends on the public support, as it did that day when you played Bobby in Houston. The tennis fan today still looks to the traditional Grand Slam tournaments to supply the sport's most dramatic moments. So sit back now and relive our Grand Slam memories.
Don Budge was the first Grand Slam winner in 1938. Maureen Connolly won the Grand Slam in 1953, preceding Margaret Court by 17 years. And Rod Laver did it in 1962 and 1969. But there were legendary champions who didn't win the Grand Slam. Helen Wills Moody, 8 Wimbledon titles, 7 U.S. Open championships. Althea Gibson made Wimbledon history in 1957, the first black player, male or female, to win the coveted title. Margaret Court was Rod Laver's Australian female counterpart. Her 2 Grand Slams were unique, winning the 4 championships in both singles and doubles. But in the 1970s, Bjorn Borg brought back memories of Bill Tilden's almost total superiority of a half-century before, winning 5 successive Wimbledon titles and a total of 6 French championships. Though Bjorn Borg retired in his prime, Chris Evert endured for almost 2 decades, defeating world-class players today who were not born when she first emerged on the tennis scene.
When I look back at my record, when people look back at my record, they're going to realize that I wasn't a flash in the pan, that I didn't have 2 or 3 brilliant years and then so-so years. I think consistency will be the word that people will think about.
Never was Chris Evert's consistency and brilliance more in evidence than in the 1985 French Open final, when she defeated the heavily favored Martina Navratilova in 3 grueling sets. If Chris Evert was the female wonder child, West Germany's Boris Becker was the wunderkind of men's tennis, when in 1985, at age 17, he became the youngest champion in the long history of Wimbledon.
Your mind matters a lot. So I wasn't really thinking about winning it, you know. Even after I won it, you know, I didn't realize that I did it, you know. It was like a dream.
The following year, Becker also became the 2nd youngest Wimbledon champion. Martina Navratilova defeated Chris Evert in the 1978 Wimbledon final. It was the opening chapter in her rise to the top of the women's international tennis scene.
When I first saw her, she was quite young. She started to work on her body and became very strong, and she's a lot more experienced now, and she's a lot more fitter. She's done everything you could possibly do to make herself into a great champion, and she's done it.
Almost a decade after Martina Navratilova's first Wimbledon victory, 17-year-old Steffi Graf of West Germany became a new challenger. But the Wimbledon Center Court is practically owned by Martina Navratilova. In 1987, she wins her 8th Wimbledon title, the last 6 in succession. In 1983, Yannick Noah was responsible for perhaps the greatest outpouring of emotion in the long history of the French Open, certainly not since the legendary days of the Four Musketeers. The 23-year-old Noah defeated defending champion Mats Wilander in the final and became France's first French Open champion in almost 4 decades. Six years earlier, Virginia Wade of Great Britain met Betty Stova of the Netherlands in one of the most emotional finals in Wimbledon history. 15 times, Virginia Wade tried at Wimbledon and failed. And now, in the 100th year of the championships, victory is in sight. She needs but 1 point to give her a 3-set victory. In 1975, Arthur Ashe met Jimmy Connors in an equally dramatic Wimbledon final. Connors, the defending champion, was an overwhelming favorite over the 31-year-old Ashe. But 2 days earlier, Ashe had given his supporters a ray of hope by defeating Bjorn Borg in the semifinals. The confidence was justified.
So the Arthur Ashe fans absolutely ecstatic, as the man who's had a dream from boyhood of winning Wimbledon stands within holding a service game to fulfill that dream.
40-15.
So 2 championship points for Arthur Ashe. That's it! And he's done it. He really has done it.
Many believe that Yvonne Lendel's rise to #1 in the world began in the 1984 French Open final against John McEnroe. After losing the first 2 sets, Lendl amazingly rebounds and now is on the verge of victory.
Give Lendl credit. He took the short ball and put the pressure on McEnroe.
Finally won a Grand Slam championship, and he showed great courage in rallying from 2 sets down to accomplish it. 3-6, 2-6, 6-4, 7.
The tiebreaker that could decide it. Their last match against one another was decided by a tiebreaker in New York in January. Borg won it.
Wimbledon, 1980, 4th set. The tiebreaker between John McEnroe and Bjorn Borg. The most dramatic set in the history of Wimbledon.
The acrobatic McEnroe has a 1-0 lead. No! John McEnroe says no and scores his first knockdown. No, sir! Bjorn Borg says, hey! No, sir, another knockdown. They've both been down in the tiebreaker. 8 points all. And you saw there the wonderful anticipation of Borg. Borg has been able to taste the championship, and McEnroe keeps putting pepper on it. That will go long. Borg did not become the champion 4 straight years by fading away. 6 Borg will serve.
I let the pressure get to me a little bit in that match. I came out real strong and dominated him early and let him get back into it. And all I remember was that it was a real fight from the second set on. And I think the tiebreaker typified most of the match. I really thought after I won that tiebreaker that I was going to win the match, but he showed a lot of determination coming back and playing so well in the fifth set.
John McEnroe had won the fourth set battle, but Bjorn Borg has won the five-set war.
I've seen and played a lot of tennis in my day, but that tiebreaker in the fourth set with the Wimbledon title on the line was one of the most pressure-packed moments in tennis history. Center court at Wimbledon is a wonderful stage, and the performances of Borg and McEnroe on that day may have been the best ever. Now, what was one of your Grand Slam memories, Billie Jean?
Well, I had many favorites, but one that stands out in my mind was 1964 when Maria Bueno defeated Margaret Smith. A lot of people have given up on Maria. The last Wimbledon singles she'd won was 1960. It's very dramatic, and she won 6-4, 7-9, 6-3. What was one of your favorites?
Well, one of mine had to be Yannick Noah's win over Mats Wilander in the finals of the 1983 French Open. I remember so well seeing him when he was only 11 years old in the Cameroons when I was on an exhibition tour, and I was just very happy to see him finally come through and win a big one. And I'm also happy to have worked with you on this history of tennis.
Thank you, Arthur. It was great fun for me. And so that concludes our trip down memory lane. It's been our pleasure being your tour guides through the history of this great sport of tennis.
So for Billie Jean and me, so long from the Tennis Hall of Fame in Newport, Rhode Island.
This has been a presentation of HBO Sports, the network of champions.
Boris Becker, Steffi Graf, Jennifer Capriati, Yvonne Lendl, Martina